Bit of a riding crowd here up West End. Are you well? He's doing well, guys. It's looking well from here to Anfáilte Roh, to Hamilton Scott looking in shot or Mahiv. On my side, we're going to talk to them all individually in a moment, but I want you to welcome first of all Oscar O'Keara, co-founder Oscar of Pop-Up Gaeilge Talks. We have Gaeilge McAvoy, podcaster with Mother of Folklore, and Katrina Hoyne, producer, director, all around Gaeilge. Give them a warm welcome, everybody. Thank you very much. I think I just hit you on your face there, Ronnie. I apologise about that. And of course, our award-winning documentary-er, Gaeilge Agat. Please welcome nGaeilge to the stage. And Katrina Arina Sturu, who directed it. So directed it. Give her a wee clap. Alright, any out there, Sparra, Gaeilge Agat, a lovely little piece. You did very well with it. You were abroad, a few film festivals as well. How was all that?
Yes, it's been screening around the world. It's gone to Austin, Texas. Katrina will know better. It's gone to Austin. Yeah, it's been in California. Unfortunately, they don't fund us to go to all of the festivals.
Okay, who funds that then?
You'd have to fund that yourself.
Okay.
So, but it's it's amazing. It's really cool. Yeah.
Well, it was a great documentary. You know, it was really well put together. I suppose the first thing I want to ask about you, and you touched upon it there, I suppose, in the documentary, and it was, which I was trying to figure out. Okay, you went to an all-English primary school and secondary school. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
You're a non-native Irish speaker.
Yeah.
So what is it that's different about you in comparison to maybe 90% of Ireland? Like, why is it that for some reason you have this huge passion for Irish language that is sometimes lacking in a huge proportion of the country? What was so special?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think I'm any different to anyone. You know, at the start of the documentary we talk about, there's the percentages there in terms of the majority of Irish people do actually really like Irish, and we do all probably have a similar level of interest or passion for it. I think the difference with me is I've just managed to find a way to actually speak it, which is the really difficult thing. So it's to move from the idea of liking Irish to actually speaking it as a thing that you do in your everyday life. And unfortunately, I think we forget that it is speaking a second language. If you're not from a Gaeilge school or a Gaeilge Teacht, it is learning a second language and trying to figure out how to do that, and you have to encounter all of the difficulties along the way. So I suppose I'm just lucky that I've had opportunities to do it. I've had friends who spoke Irish. It's mainly been through my social circles, and then I've found social things. Like I started doing comedy, met a lot of people through that. I did a show on TáGaeilgeAgat in 2013 that developed my Irish, and then I started playing Gaelic football with an Irish speaking team, and that just meant that I was speaking Irish every day, you know, with my peers, and it was just a normal part of my life.
So when we talk about comedy, in Irish then, what was it like when you think back to the first ever set that you heard through a leathanaigh that you performed? What was the feeling like backstage? Were you nervous? Were you excited?
Yeah. No, I was quite nervous. Yeah, it was terrible. It was definitely the worst gig that I've ever done in my life. Yeah. Yeah.
But you continued and persevered.
I did. Yes, looking for
Why?
Yeah, no, it was. I signed up. I had gotten my Irish to a level. So in 2013, I set myself a New Year's resolution where I was going to speak Irish at least once every day, because I still had this interest in Irish and wasn't finding a way to do it. So I had a few friends who spoke Irish. I'd speak with them on a daily basis, and then I saw this application about 6 months later for this TáGaeilgeAgat program for Irish speaking comedians, and I was like, oh, my Irish is definitely good enough for this now. It wasn't. It definitely wasn't. Yeah. So the first gig that I ever did was at 3 o'clock on a Sunday in Carna. It's not, I mean, for anyone who's done comedy, it's not the ideal gig, and and if you don't speak Irish, it's like additionally difficult.
It's a native Irish speaking
but
Irish, isn't it?
The way I see it, from getting through all of those experiences and coming out on the other side, it's actually, okay, so you develop skills in a language, but you also develop this kind of personal resilience as well, where you can kind of, new situations aren't that difficult, and you can just kind of throw yourself into anything, and it's not that difficult. Yeah.
Okay, so suppose mar ocal scurin sin mastu enya and Duggan and Changa in with ditch nakwal or file emerlis. So does the Irish language actually lend itself in any ways? Anything that you can actually achieve through comedy in the Irish language that maybe you can't get in the English language? Or no?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, definitely in my personal life, it's the same point that I just said, and I think it's the same for speaking any second language, and like managing to do that is that confidence that you build in yourself and the resilience that you get. In terms of writing content for jokes, I can play because I use a kind of deadpan, socially awkward character, so
she can relate.
Wasn't a joke. I don't know. So that, and then because I play to my strength in Irish, which is my lack of Irish language skills, so I can kind of make the jokes out of the mistakes that I make, and yeah, so that's the content. You actually touched exactly what I was going to say. I watched a documentary last week at work, and I saw the set that you had done with the, over in Edinburgh and elsewhere as well. And what struck me, what stood out to me about it was that you really brought yourself down to a level that people probably found it very accessible. And I felt like I was really with you in it, and the fact that you were very honest about having learnt it, and to me that really added to the experience of watching the comedy. So that was my own opinion of it, So maybe that lent itself to it, I think it's I actually realised that after doing the TG Cahir show, a lot of the cameramen would come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, I like you because I can understand what you're saying." So I realised, okay, actually my Irish is at a level, that's accessible for my peer group, and my peer group are the ones who aren't from a Gael school but who have just kind of learned Irish like we all have, and have a baseline of it, but it has to be broken down at that simple level. Great.
Oscar here, Chimatatu.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Majastu Echo.
So
Oscar, TáGaeilge Agat ogin art Mayaler and pop-up Gaeilge. The pop-up Gaeilge, this is a huge, it's 2 years going now next Thursday. Regardless that. There you go. So I suppose to do is for a dive should Nackle Rock Hinch if we care to take guess. For those people, Oscar, who may not be familiar with it, what exactly is this pop-up Gaeilge thing?
It is a monthly piss-up.
Simple as.
It is a debaucherous monthly piss-up, where we select a bar, usually the best bar we can find or the most suitable bar we can find that month. We invite Gaels, anybody who's interested in the Irish language, to come and get riotously drunk. And alcohol has been proved scientifically to help with language acquisition or perception of language.
Drinkaware.ie, guys. Drinkaware.ie,
And you've touched on a good point. This is why it's not formal in any way. This is why there isn't any copyright on it, and this is why it's not sponsored by anybody. So that every time I talk about it, I don't have to give a Drinkaware message.
Except when you're live and TG Cahir, like, no, Drinkaware.ie, guys. Yes. Oscar, Cower to an inspirage margin and Kayla Kinfar. Or me too came for a hockey too. You know what? To me, Geary and Rod Shaw won. Okay, we know we have the crack. I mean, it's it's had a bit of piss up. It's always good. Whose phone is that ringing? So what was it what was your own personal main motivation for it? Why did you think Dublin and Ireland, I suppose, needed the pop-up Gaeilge?
I suppose the theme of this evening is about positivity and moving from negativity about the language to positivity. And myself and my co-vaudor, or my how would you pronounce co-vaudor? My other boatman, or my fellow boatman, Padre O'Caivani, we were quite frustrated with some of the stuff that was mainly the comment section on journal.ie that used to just drive us demented. And there was a particular video that was posted on the journal by a journalist who shall remain nameless, and it was basically nonsense. It was 10 minutes of absolute nonsense about the Irish language. We asked for a right of reply and we were refused. So instead we went, okay, well, let's go to the pub. What actually happened is that I started talking to I started talking to the journalist on Twitter. Like, I slid into his DMs and I started talking to him, and I realised that his main objection to money and rights and all of that was down to the fact that he didn't think that Irish speakers existed, really. He thought that nGaeilge was a scam, and he thought that anybody who spoke Irish in an urban setting or in any setting was doing it for some kind of performative reason. And so I said, okay, well, if you challenge this, like if you go the Irish language is just a performative act, then it's quite easy to deny people rights, it's quite easy to deny all of those things that go along with it. And it's a logical thing that, okay, this is performative, doesn't deserve funding, whatever. So we go, how do you prove that we exist? If I'm standing next to you in the pub, hammered, with 20, 30, 40, 50 other people speaking Irish, it is very hard to deny that I exist. I can be loud, you know. So, so that's what kind of inspired us to do it, and we just created a Facebook post, asked people to come along. We were expecting 30, 40 people. I remember turning the corner, expecting that there'd be nobody there, and I'd be on my lonesome in the bar. And sure, there was like 40, 50, 60 people, and there was 200 people, and the place just overflowed. Then, within 2 or 3 days, we got a message from New York. Can you set up a pop-up Gaeltacht in New York? And we said, no, but you can. And so then we started not only running it monthly, but we provided a zip file so that people could do their own. And what it does, like unbeknownst to us, like we were trying to do it as something for ourselves, something selfish, rather than just being in a bar speaking Irish and then having to have a conversation with the guy next to you about how it's taught in school and the rest of the stuff. So we were trying to create that mini Gaeltacht for ourselves. And what ended up happening is that people who weren't Gaeilgeoirí, let's say, started coming along to use it as a practice, to use it as that immersion that people seek. I mean, we go to nGaeilge, but not everybody can go to nGaeilge. Not everybody wants to. Some people are maybe intimidated for whatever reasons, rightly or wrongly. So we were trying to create this temporary thing for ourselves, and it ended up being a permanent thing for other people that they rely on, and to get that immersion that they seek. And there's nobody judging you. There's no entrance exam at the door. There's no, yeah. So that's.
Spéisiú agus táisibh gab líonar an bhór an teacht se thugann me capú be céidir bhór an workmans Jardín se thugann.
Yeah, Belders.
Belders, so be much still the sin. Suppose Oscar Tasogan came facher to Ayrshul a kin size ash. Oh, so what kind of feedback, what kind of reception have you obviously received still going 2 years later from, I suppose, the population of Dublin and Ireland, the non-native speakers, I suppose? What kind of reception you got from them?
Well, it's interesting because you obviously we don't book a place, we don't book the bar, like we don't reserve an area, so therefore we are surrounded by English speakers, predominantly English speakers, and their reaction is brilliant. It is that interaction, that confluence, that makes it all worthwhile. And they start speaking in Irish. The bar staff who profess to you, or who said to you like 2 hours earlier that they can't speak any Irish, suddenly have really good Irish, like at 11 o'clock at night. The barman, or like, you know, and you mentioned, I think there was a comment on the start of the film, which was excellent, by the way, Harbor, that, you know, there's no money in it. Well, I think that there are several bars in the city who would disagree strongly with that, like, you know.
It's funny, you know, and this isn't in any way trying to promote alcohol, whatever, but something, well, as he goes on to promote alcohol here, but no, one thing that I found in comparison to, and I feel it's going to come later on, but, you know, I have a story as well, and I'm not a native speaker, etc., etc., but I find that a huge part of the rest of Ireland, if you want to call it, the non-Gaeltacht speakers, a huge part of the problem is confidence issue, and I just feel in a relaxed environment of a pub, okay, it's just a relaxed whatever you're having. I just feel like I find sometimes my own Irish is better because I'm feeling more relaxed, and the only reason I can put down to that is because maybe the inhibition isn't there. I personally think that's a huge, one of the biggest barriers is just literally up there, you know.
It's scientifically proven.
I think so, and I'm sure there's studies done for it. Oscar, this to Coniart Somalia Clea. Céir de Captain Tussa, Céir de Warles, Céir de Hurim, Fui Start nGaeilge, the state of Irish, where would you say we are at? It's November now, 2018. Where are we as a city, as a county, as a country in terms of the Irish language right now?
Well, our educational system, flawed as it is producing students, or is producing educated people who profess, as of the last census, 18 to 21-year-olds profess fluency like at a level of 60 to 70%. So we are producing people who can speak Irish in one way, or are happy to say that they can. Yeah. What we need to build on that, and you mentioned the Gaeilge and there's pop-up Gaeltacht, there's Cuid nGaeilge, there's anseo, there's so many other things that require a personal effort. not like there can't be infrastructure built the whole way through somebody's life. You have to kind of make, as Anya has done, take personal responsibility for it. Where I think that I think the state of the nation is poor but getting better, and I think there are plenty of green shoots, and even a night like this is demonstration of that. So, and I think that it behoves. Is behoves or behooves? The problem, maybe like, behooves. This is up to us. It is up to all of us who are involved to understand that it is not a binary, is féidir, ní féidir, that there is a whole range. And even when you talk about confidence issues, even like now, I would say that I fall generally into the bracket of native speaker, as I was raised by Irish speakers in Ireland, Irish in Dublin, whatever. My kids are being raised through Irish. So, but even I would have that nervousness. Not only maybe, like in Connemara Irish I'm more comfortable with, but, you know, if I'm speaking to somebody from Kirkagheena or from Gaeilge or whatever, like, then that nervousness creeps up on all of us. And I would say that, like, you'll even meet Gaeilge, people from nGaeilge, and you can sense a bit of nervousness in them sometimes when they're talking to each other. And it is that nervousness that is the huge barrier, and it's the huge barrier, and it's something that we need to work on, and we all need to kind of talk about it and acknowledge it, and say, as Anya has said, that it's okay.
And I want to ask one more thing, Oscar, and I want to move on then, but you did touch on it. You said the school system, you know, you had your own opinions on that. My own opinion is, you know, I always find it kind of unbelievable how a lot of people will find, after having spent, we'd say, how many years in primary school and secondary school, you know, all that time learning Irish, but yet they will spend 4 or 5 years learning French and German, but feel more competent in French or German or whatever else, Spanish, than they will in Irish. And I always wonder, how could that be, and why is that? Because we started Irish at such a young age. Would you say, would you say there's a huge impact on curriculum? Without going too far down that line, would you say it's
we're not doing the way it's taught, are we?
Are we doing the way it's taught?
Are we doing the way it's taught?
Not the way it's taught, but is it an issue?
No, well, as I said, I mean, if you look at the census, which is statistical, you have 60-70% of people leaving the education system saying that they can speak Irish. So let's just park that for 1 second. I think it's about what you do after that. And it's, you know, nobody, when you're learning French, you go to France and you live a life in France or whatever, or you immerse yourself in a French thing, and so therefore this idea that, what are you doing? Oh, I'm learning Irish. It's like, that's just a little boring. Like, it's like, what are you doing? I'm playing football in Irish, or I'm playing music in Irish, or I'm reading something that's of interest to me. And I think that we have to find things that are of interest to us, and we have to find hidden information. The Irish language has to be a key that unlocks something for you, rather than it being the sole objective.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Yes, you want to pop in there?
I just want to say something on that point, because I struggled before I found the Gaelic football team. I'd be trying to join meet-up groups and things, and I found it was just people sitting around talking about Irish in Irish.
Okay, intimidating.
So, not that interesting, maybe.
Boring.
Like, just boring, you know. Like, so it's about trying to make it part of your normal life and, like, connected to the interests that you're doing. So that it's just, you just happen to be doing something, and you happen to be doing it through Irish. And
speaking of fun things, Gaeilge Agat, Mother Folklore. Hey. Mother Folklore, first of all, tell us a bit about what it actually is. What was your objective with it?
Yeah, thank you very much. So Mother Folklore is the brainchild of our podcast daddy, Derek O'Shea. He couldn't be with us tonight, so I am super subbing for him. So thank you very much for having me. So Mother Folklore was came out of, so anyone on Twitter who's familiar with the Twitter page at the Irish For, Derek set this up when he was trying to learn Irish, and effectively what he would do was just tweet these words in Irish, kind of interesting words that he kind of came across, and there was a really big response from it, and so people were really interested to he would like tweet like during the storm when everyone was out of bread, he would like tweet the Irish for sliced pan or something, so it was like, you know, topical.
Handy.
Exactly. So Derek kind of contacted a group of us who were interacting. Padder's involved, Padder O'Cuid, he's involved, myself and a couple of others, and effectively we started this podcast, Mother Folklore, where we talk about issues around the Irish language in English, and that always confuses my family members. They're like, so you're doing a podcast about Irish. Is it in English? Yes, it's about Irish, but it's in English. But so we talk about you know, these things that frighten people, to try and break down the barriers to make Irish more accessible. We have a mixture of contributors, from people who are native speakers to people who are just learning, and kind of I fall somewhere in the middle of that. And we talk about all of these things that people, you know, didn't really understand fully in school. You know, we had an episode on the Mo Canida.
Don't mention the MC word.
Sorry. We haven't done one on the Tischel Ginneduck yet, but it's coming. But you know, we talk about these issues that people kind of wouldn't associate with Irish. So we have had people on who are doing like fun things in Irish. So people who are doing different things. We've had people on talking about machine translation, really kind of interesting topics, so that we can make Irish more accessible and kind of break down these barriers around Irish and make people more comfortable about it. Like something that came out in the what you were saying, Oscar, and then in the film as well, is there this fear that people have around Irish. And I definitely have had it myself. Again, I'm not from an Irish speaking background either, didn't go to Gaeilge school, and I had this fear. But kind of what we say on the podcast all the time is, like, if you had a friend in your English speaking life who's constantly correcting your use of, I don't know, the indirect relative clause, like, cut that negativity out of your life, you know?
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So I mean, if you're accepting that from your friendships in the Irish language, what a weird friendship to have, you know? You don't need that negativity in your life. You should have, you know, okay, if you're asking for advice, that's fine, but if it's somebody who's continuously correcting your grammar, what a weirdo. Like, cut that person out of your life. So I do think that people have this fear. Like, realistically, what's the worst that can happen when you speak Irish to, you know, this fear is present in everybody. Oscar mentioned that it's there with people from the Gaeilge. Native speakers are worried that people who have, say, degrees in Irish might correct their use of a certain word. So everybody has this kind of fear that stops everybody else from speaking to everybody else. Just go with it, just speak, and that's what we're trying to do with Motherfuckler.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that ethos as well. I suppose as well, Gaeilge, just in terms of your own experience, you know, the same as Enya there, like, I always am intrigued to find what is the key factor that really made you guys pursue Irish as a long-term profession in friend groups. I know for myself, it was music was my link in, to be honest, and the culture was my kind of in, from having come from Letterkenny, which was a non-Gaeltacht town. It's better now, but it wasn't great back then. So can you pinpoint anything in particular that really made you decide that, you know what, this is something that I really love, I'm really proud of, and I want to continue developing?
Yeah, so like that, I come from, you know, my parents don't speak any Irish. I'm from Laois, you know, there's no kind of Irish speaking community there. There is, I think, one Gaeilge school, primary school, and then, or two, and then the nearest Gaeilge school secondary school is in Carlow. So there's really not a place for Irish speakers. So it was a really kind of weird thing for me to be interested in, and I was really kind of didn't understand why I was so interested in it for a long time. And it's not until I kind of got older that I realised, so I have dyslexia, and I wasn't diagnosed with dyslexia till I was much older, so it wasn't until I went to university to study Irish that I was assessed and found to be dyslexic. And normally in schools you get an exemption from studying Irish when you're found to be dyslexic, but I wasn't assessed at a young age, so I never got that exemption. However, there's a bunch of research done on languages and dyslexia, and kind of languages that are good for people with dyslexia and languages that are bad, or languages that are more difficult to obtain. And one of the most difficult languages for a person with dyslexia is English. So I spent my whole life kind of struggling in my first language, being afraid to kind of pronounce new words, not knowing you know, not being able to read kind of with the same fluency that my peers were. But when I started to kind of gain fluency in Irish, I found myself for the very first time, and I don't want to get sappy on it, but I kind of found myself for the very first time kind of feeling at home with this language that wasn't sort of tricking me, because there's rules of pronunciation in Irish, there's rules of spelling that don't exist in English, and that are just so palatable to my dyslexic brain. So for the first time, I just really felt, you know, this is the language that's been missing from my life, and I'm so thankful for that, because subsequent to that, my entire life, I mean, I've dedicated my whole life to languages now. That's what I do now. So without the Irish language, and had I been given that exemption, I mean, okay, had I been given the tools for dyslexia, I probably would have had a better time in school, but nevertheless, had I been given that exemption, this whole part of my life and the part of my identity now would have been completely taken away from me. So I'm so thankful for what Irish has given me.
So the Motherfucker inis Gaeilge Danish to play focal in nGaeilge. Kerry and focal is far in nGaeilge at TáGaeilge. What's your favourite Irish word?
Yeah, so this is a thing we love to do in Motherfucker when we have a guest on. We talk about their favourite Irish words. And I actually have a three-way tie, I can't decide. It was just two, and then we did a live show and somebody came up with a word and I was like, oh, that's a really good one, I like that one too. So my long-time favourite is Smugglerone, which is jellyfish,
like
which translates to seal snot, which is like objectively better than English. Like, has anyone ever seen a jellyfish on the beach? That's what it looks like. And then I quite like Uachtaráin. This came up at our live show, which is the Irish word for president. And because somebody asked the live show we did, why does the word for president sound so like the word for ice cream? So
very true. Yeah, I'm in a rave actually in nursery. I've never caught that.
And the reason is that cream rises to the top and the president is the top citizen. So like that's so sensible.
In most cases.
Well, the one we have now is a great guy. And then I quite like the word intake, which is I mean there is an English translation, but I think it sounds better in Irish. I suppose it's something that is inwardly understood, something that you sort of understand without having to explain.
It says what it is, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's better in Irish. So I quite like that word. So that's my kind of.
Caird Food, what's your favourite Irish words, guys? Shout one up. Mishnock. Yeah, it's like Mishnock. Yeah.
Canappy.
Caird? Canappy. Because it's a bit hard to say, isn't it? Cut or smash. Cén fa mai hada sin. And foom, yeah, and foom to jasna well. It's my love's a hashki.
Hashki.
You know, have to. Amski to shin jas vasta, yeah. To kind of into jas again who's on that well. Katrina, speaking of Canyon She, you're a native speaker from Carna. Indrawan. So, in Akila TG Cahar, Dinny Wild Shin, a Coney and Lathbager. So, in a shum or do speak between if we do Hattie Haynes, tell us a little bit about, obviously, you're a native speaker, maybe a little bit about your own background and how you've ended up here and working, obviously, directing on you here.
So, that's mich an is le Gaeilge, chumar skull, tríd Gaeilge mo hílar fad. Níor na ein scoiliocht tríd Béarla agus I grew up like an old school really. It was my first time going to classes or anything like that through English when I went to university. And so I suppose I come from a different kind of perspective from a lot of people in Ireland, and it's something that I maybe didn't really understand, that was a kind of a unique thing until going to university. And then
so what did you find at university? What was different and what did you not expect to see?
You just realise that there's so many different attitudes and perspectives towards the language, and people, like Oscar kind of mentioned there a while ago, that people hear you speaking Irish and they kind of think it's a statement or something, or that you're trying to make a point, and it's like no, this is just how I grew up. This is my first language. It's how I speak. Irish just comes to me more naturally than English quite often. And also you kind of hear a lot of people saying similar kind of things of like, I did it in school and I didn't really like it and it's taught badly, and just a lot of different perspectives that I was kind of interested in exploring. And I suppose when we kind of came together to talk about making comhrá agus agla, that's kind of what we wanted to do, is to kind of have a go at kind of exploring some of the viewpoints.
Agus the Johnny play agus a cancer comhrá agus agla agus hánig muid éní slú here. Céirde has amachtit Katrina a díomh inrod dóm tú as and a ro inrod a chur éinewords is tú Johnny Taffet and Clara Fashion. What stood out to you? Did you learn anything that you really maybe weren't expecting from the documentary making?
Keint, yeah. Stoi on agla sin a bhíonn ardíine a leathanaigh a labhairt. Like, there's so many people we spoke to making that documentary that didn't kind of end up in the finished film. We got vox pops on the street. We spoke to a lot of different people about their own experience, and one thing that kind of kept coming up was the fear that people have to just kind of speak it, and the otherness that people feel towards it. Like, it's something that's something for the people over there and some Gaeltacht in the West. Like, it's not kind of, people don't see it as their own language. So yeah, that was an eye-opener.
And you know, on that point as well, we mentioned the agla, which is obviously part of the title of the documentary. What do you think maybe we could do to improve that? Pop Gaeilge, obviously one example of ways to, you know, make it more inclusive. Is there anything else you think that might, you know, any other ideas you might have that would be like opened up a bit more?
Yeah, I think if people kind of weren't afraid to just kind of open a conversation with the cúpla focal, even like in the Gaeltacht, they're like something that kills me sometimes is like when people do make an effort to speak cúpla focal, and say for instance I worked in the bar in Orson Gael in Galway for a while, and you would see sometimes people would come up, all sorts of nationalities of people would come up to the bar, and they knew that this was a place where they could go and speak Irish, and they'd go to order their drink in Irish, and the person behind the bar might not hear them properly and would respond to them in English, and you would just see the kind of deflation in the person's face, like thinking that they kind of had said it wrong or something, and like the bartender didn't do that intentionally, but I could just see the kind of effect it had on the person. And the same with like being with friends of mine in the Aran Islands, and they're like, okay, I'm going to go into the shop now and I'm going to do this whole transaction in English or in Irish, and then they're answered in English, and it could just be total absent-mindedness of whoever's
without
behind.
any malice, it's just exactly.
Yeah, but people kind of take it very personally, and they think it's kind of they're being fobbed off, or that their Irish isn't good enough. And so I think if Irish speakers were a bit more aware of that, and a bit more open to kind of to even just throwing a cúpla focal into their conversations with people who have an interest in the language.
Yeah, because it's there. And I suppose as Gaeilge was saying too, nearly in Gael, Dini Bay Torch Machfin Grammar, like we look at our English, my English right now is, I'm sure there's 4 different tenses in the one sentence. It's completely messed up, but I don't really get given out to that much about my English. You obviously have an advantage, I guess, in terms of the Irish language, in terms of that was your first language, am I right in saying that, Katrina? Mm-hmm. Yeah, your first language. So, one thing that this definitely, it's probably a natural progression when you look at music, and working through our Ceol, being fusion on. We have a look at Irish Trab now, we look at Flat TV, and we have a lot of fusion. I mean, things are moving on. There are some people that prefer the traditions and keep it the way it is, but I mean, a lot of people too like bring it forward. In terms of this word that we have, Berlicus, we're bringing in, English terms into the Irish language. What would be your own opinion of that? Is it rud ag an Pernish Jacker? No, I'm Captain Tuga rud mai town.
Sílim go rud má atá, is rud nóirthe a Horlins leon teanga. Any language kind of grows and adapts with time, and I think it's a sign that the Irish language is still alive, and it's a malleable thing. It's not a fixed thing that was decided on fado. It's changeable, and so there was a, what's it called, the Caidán. They came up with the Caidán there in the 80s or whatever it was, and that kind of leaves out some words from Donegal, for instance, and it kind of like, it's mostly focused on Connemara Irish from my understanding. And so and that's an interesting thing about Irish as well, is the difference of the dialects. So I think its evolution is to be celebrated.
Yeah, I agree. Just like the TáGaeilgeAgat in Sawala, Facebook Bionish, Tamil Bionish, Club Workman's my Clea. From Gary Clishel, Shimma to In Duramoga, if we care to tag Tarlunocht, Facial Live Asian Scribe She, Hayes Queen Vision Shaw, Numas Twitter Ta on his Facial Live and Ash Clib, Block Bio Usage. I'm going to throw it to the floor now in a second, lads, so you have a question or two ready. But just very quickly, I do want to throw my own story about this because it's something I feel very passionate about. Personally, I didn't like Irish at all. As a school kid, I went to English schools. In fact, I didn't like it so much so that I failed it in secondary school. I got an F. I was doing quite well in school in a lot of subjects, but I did fail Irish, and I didn't really care, to be honest. Didn't really affect me. I had a very negative attitude towards it. I didn't really see the point of it. And I remember it was really just not going to affect my life in any way. A few years later, there was a new Gaeilge College open in Litchercan, College Alley. It's still there to this day. And Dainty made in winter my parents kind of convinced me to go for a year. They knew the principal. And I went for a year, and I was going in with no vocabulary really. I mean, I'd failed it, I had no interest, and it was a huge challenge, and I didn't like it. And not only could I not learn, but I wasn't able to speak to my peers because it was quite strict an Irish rule in the school. There was actually a list of Berla in English just on the wall, and my name was on it nearly every day, so I ended up being a mute for about 6 months. But I remember, and this is a big fast forward of the whole story, but I remember it took me until June of my first year before I actually was able to understand what was happening around me, and I still couldn't reply, but I was actually able to more or less follow what was happening. This is the whole immersion thing again that I just really I think is such an advantage, and you know, it's a great thing to have. And I suppose Ashin and Mac and Shin, Hannig and Grad, or the love for the language came from me then through my in was music. You know, I play a bit of trad, and that was kind of my in as group of in school. And 4 years later, I left the Irish school, and I was moderately, you know, I was fluent to a certain standard. I got an A in Leaving Cert standard, which means something to some people and nothing to others. But it was an achievement for myself. And then in my customer Winchore, I taught in primary school in Finglas for years, and I didn't use much Irish. We were focusing on English and literacy, to be honest. And in each time I go over to TáGaeilge Agat go down Amsterdam, I can now to Coney or say Ganter Gaeilge. I live in a Gaeltacht area. Tam say ignore to nearly get I speak Irish every day. Most of my friend groups now, it's Irish speakers that I have, and I'm on stage here chairing a debate on Irish. It's something that, you know, without sounding too whatever about it, it has totally changed my life. I've seen it in a whole different way. I know what it's like to be there and to hate it and to not get it and to have no link to it. But I've seen now what it's done for me, and I mean, really, it's given me opportunities that I could never personally have gotten in the English language, and that would be the one thing I would say is, like, you know, okay, to gesture it, when people say, yes, opportunities are there, that's fine, but I think there's actually more opportunities there in the right fields in the Irish language that actually aren't there in English, so it just lends itself to that. Sin Gaeilge.